have up here is the assassination attempt on the Iraqi president. So I just want to kind of get into what's been unfolding in Iraq in the past couple of weeks. In October, there was an election in Iraq that was where in Iraq, there's never like one party that's going to win a majority. It's not like Republicans versus Democrats. There's Sunni parties, there's Kurdish parties, and there's a variety of Shia parties. And they include parties that represent the Shia militias, the Popular Mobilization Forces, Hush Tashabi is another way to refer to those groups. And then there's more of like a Shia populist bloc, maybe to call it, led by Motada al-Sadr. And they're the Sadrist. And so I believe they won the most seats in the last election, but this election they did even better, winning a plurality of seats. But a lot of those seats came from the seats that would have been won by the Shia militias. And so for the past couple weeks, Sadr has been trying to form a coalition, and it's been met with protest, particularly from the parties that represent the Shia militias, feeling like they got unfairly treated either through fraud or something in the recent elections in Iraq. I actually have no idea if the results are fraudulent or more fraudulent than normal or anything like that, Connor. But that's what that party is claiming, that, and of course the Sadrists are fine with the results. They're very happy with it. Although, as Jason Ditz wrote last week at antiwar.com, they're not having a very easy time building any kind of ruling government. This is a parliamentary system, so what happens is people are voting for a party, I think, most of the time. Then people from that party's list are put in the parliamentary positions, and then they make a list of positions, so prime minister, foreign minister, defense minister, etc. And then all those people get voted on in one big group, and if it gets approval from a majority of the parliament, then that becomes the ruling government of Iraq, right? And so it's been very hard to form a government for them essentially the entire time that's existed. The U.S. has tried to take what was Saddam's Iraq, that was a dictatorship, and turn into a democracy. It's always been an absolute calamity. So in Iraq, the main power does lie with the prime minister, not the president, although there usually is a president. So if you hear something like the Iraqi president does this, that's a far less important position. I think a position that by law is actually held by a Kurd, and where then the speaker of the parliament would be a Sunni, and the leader of the government would be a Shia. So Sadr's trying to form a coalition. It's not going well. The militias are claiming election fraud. And then recently, Connor, we had 3 people killed in a protest. It was a pro-militia protest in Baghdad, and then they were killed by Iraqi security forces. And so this kind of shows that even though the Iraqi security forces are Shia, the Iraqi government is Shia, these militias are Shia, the Sadrists are Shia, it doesn't mean that, oh, look, they're all the same, right? It would be just as stupid as saying, well, the American Christians all agree on blah, 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 blah. It doesn't work that way. They have a wildly different views, especially political views. And so, at this protest, 3 are killed. And then the leader of the Shia militias in Iraq did say that there would be a response to the protest killings. Now, after that, we had 3 drones launched at the residence of the Iraqi prime minister. 2 of those drones were in some way either intercepted, downed, or just didn't reach their target. But according to the Iraqi government, they were downed. And the home of the prime minister, Mustafa Kadhimi, was hit with one of the drones. Now, Connor, I haven't seen, I guess, an actual picture or any kind of evidence that makes me know the exact size of this drone. It seems like it was a suicide type drone with like an explosive maybe around the size of a grenade attached to this. So it's not like somebody took a Predator drone and stuck a Hellfire missile on it and sent that through the president's window or something, or the prime minister's window. I just want to make it kind of clear. If people, when I saw it looked like, some minor explosion had happened just outside of the building. It didn't look like that big of an attack. It's not like a wall was collapsed or anything like that. Just trying to give as much detail as possible because I know most people are listening and not watching, and
Yeah,
I don't have a picture up here anyways. But go ahead, Connor.
I was just gonna say the pictures I saw were like it looked like a door had been blown off. So it's like that level of an explosion,
Yep.
and it didn't collapse any building structures, but that kind of a thing.
And at least as far as I'm aware, Connor, nobody was killed in this attack. 70 security, or seven, excuse me, just seven, were injured. They were members of the Iraqi security forces. It wasn't exactly clear to me if that, these were people that were maybe outside of the palace, that are not palace, the residents that were maybe hit with the drones that were down beforehand, or if they were actually people inside or just outside who were hit with the drone that actually hit the house. They say the president wasn't, or the prime minister, excuse me, was not injured in the attack. However, who knows? I really don't trust a whole lot of the reporting coming out of the Iraqi government on this. If they feel the need to, present as secure and that we completely foiled this attack, I see it as, possible that they would downplay it. Or if they want to make the president look a little bit more like a hero, maybe they play it up a little bit. There's a lot of possibilities of what's going on here. No group has claimed responsibility for this attack. And when we look at who it could have possibly been, the Shia militias, they should, I think, be at the top of the list of suspects. It seems like it could just be a coincidence, or it could be directed retaliation that 3 people were killed and 3 drones were used. Now, I believe the leader of the Shia militias denied it and said something along the lines of, "We wouldn't bother wasting the drones," although I'm not sure how much of a denial that is.
Yeah.
As far as it goes, there's the Islamic State that operates in Iraq who would want to do this. There's Shia and Kurds with legitimate grievances. I don't think that, there's a lot of people in Iraq who are suffering right now. And so if this was just some group of people who carried out assassination, absolutely possible. Is it even possible that maybe it was the Iraqi government that did this essentially in order to, drum up more support, or look, like, you could generate states of emergency with these kind of actions, right? You could become more authoritarian. False flags happen. Not saying that's what happened here, but we really don't know. And so that's why I want to break down, Connor. I think that's all I really know, all we really have on it. I'm sure more is going to unfold, but one of the things I did want to mention is this is the reason why on the show I have talked about the pressure that the U.S. has been putting on the Iraqi government to put more pressure to demilitarize the Iraqi Shia militias, and how this could eventually come to a head between the Iraqi government and the Shia militias, and that's possibly what we're seeing right here.
Yeah, I saw that Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UN, and the Americans have come out and condemned the attack. I think the Americans called it an act of terrorism against the Iraqi state. And yeah, to highlight what you were saying about how it's a lot of these details are ambiguous still. Yeah, I saw differing things about like where some of the reports are saying like in Middle East Eye, I think that they were saying that he was not even at his residence inside the green zone, that he was at some remote location. And also they keep revising the numbers and changing them, where it'll say 7 guards were wounded. Then they changed it to 6. And then another report I saw, I think that came out more recently, said that 2 bodyguards had been injured. And I will just correct myself. I went back and looked at the page. It does look like there was damage to some walls and some like some concrete, like some structure had come down. But it was, I guess what I meant was like it's not like a building was destroyed or anything like that.
Or a wall even or
Yeah,
anything like that. It was, you know, I would call it minor damage.
right.
You know, they're bringing a contractor in to clean this thing up. It's not like they had to have a whole demo team knock down like the front of the house to rebuild it or something. Um,
And one
so
of the Shia militia groups did say that I was quoting earlier before we started the show. The Coordination Committee of the Iraqi resistance factions said they said they labeled the attack a targeting of the Iraqi state, but also claimed it was fabricated by its enemies in an attempt to conflate the raid with the killing of its supporters in the Friday protest. And they said creating an incident like this will not prevent us from insisting on punishing the perpetrators, especially those involved with the bloodshed of innocent peaceful demonstrators.
yeah.
So
And
yeah,
so that, I mean, that's a great point in all that, Connor, is in Iraq in the past, these kind, and I think actually last year around this time, or maybe it was 2 years ago, in November in Iraq, there were major protests where hundreds of people were killed. And so, you know, this sort of thing could spark off something bigger. And it certainly seems that, at least in the international media, I'm guessing in Iraq too, an attempted assassination, at least allegedly, on the life of a president gets the headlines off of anything else. There's one more story in Iraq I want to mention before we move on. And I think this is pretty important, maybe even more important in some ways. This from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. U.S. led coalition says Iraq military still needs U.S. support. Now, this does come from the Office of Operation Inherent Resolve, and so this is the military mission to Afghanistan, the anti-ISIS coalition, and so they are saying that, hey, look, we're still relevant and still needed. In a way, and that is a way to look at it, like a government bureaucracy. It doesn't want to close its doors. It wants to find something to do. And so saying the Iraqi military still needs them to fight ISIS gives them something to do. At the same time, I mean, I don't know how to interpret this other than the military admitting one of the biggest, most massive, unbelievable failures you could ever have, right? It's been, what, 15 years since they formed the Iraqi military, and it can't even fight off an insurgency within its own country? What the hell good is this thing that we keep giving billions of dollars a year then? I mean, it seems like, I don't know if you maybe have a little different take on this, Connor, but it seems that this isn't a mission of failure, but rather it's used by the Hawks in the United States to further this group's mission when clearly it can't succeed. Now, the other thing to mention is we are coming up, what, a month and a half now, where Biden says that we should be switching or changing the U.S. mission in Iraq from a combat one to like a training and assisting one, which I think is absolutely meaningless changes in definition. However, if you are like, if your job is dependent on, your post is dependent on, you know, having this Operation Inherent Resolve existing, you know, if you're the commander of that, if that post dissolves, like, you might be doing something less important. You may be getting kind of effectively a demotion. Um, you could, you know, you see the writing on the wall maybe with the name of the mission changing, and so that prompts you to put out ridiculous statements like this, saying what the Iraqi military, after the US has spent hundreds of billions of dollars on it, really can't deal with ISIS within its own borders. This is crazy.
and this is like it's hard to overestimate how diminished of a compared to like the ISIS that we were introduced, you know, that we everybody was you know, the theatrical ISIS of 4 years ago and or 5 years ago, from 2014 to 2017, when they really did control territory the size of Great Britain in eastern Syria and western Iraq, which again was a result of the U.S. intervention. But so much of this too, and you're right, absolutely, is such a total failure and embarrassing admission. But that doesn't seem to stop them anywhere else. And you know, so much of this, as we've covered on the show, is about checking Iran. I mean, as you were covering recently, the position at al-Tanf is directly on that Baghdad-Damascus highway, you know, trying to block, you know, whatever arms shipments from Iran all the way to Hezbollah. And so, there's so many moving parts involved, but yeah, it's interesting that they can just admit that. Like ISIS attacks are down 86% in Syria and 20% in Iraq, but yeah, this is an indefinite presence, and we know, as Biden already came out, like he said, this is such a it's not even really a cosmetic change. They're just changing the wording of it, and essentially nothing else is changing about the presence in Iraq. But that may be changing now that Sadr, if they can get it together and get closer to putting a government together and picking a new prime minister with Kadhimi on his way out, that calculus may change here pretty soon.
All right, Connor.